name's Chris Banahan, and I'm going to be showing an exhibition at the Carver Courthouse in Kinvara in September of new works based on my experience of the lockdown. So the paintings will be based on images I've taken during my daily 2-kilometre walk on Trot Beach near Kinvara. Then I go back to the studio and work on these images up into larger paintings. The show is the result of that, and I'm going to discuss in detail some of the work. The exhibition addresses themes of loneliness with the effects of social isolation during the lockdowns, particularly for the elderly and the vulnerable in rural communities. The exhibition also considers the positive effects of the lockdowns, such as the re-evaluation of the natural beauty of local rural locations, and being fortunate enough to be surrounded by such imprisoned splendour, particularly with the fine weather of the first lockdown. Therefore, during the social isolation of the pandemic, I tried to address issues of confinement, loneliness and loss of liberty, and losing one's grip on reality as we all began to live in a virtual world online. The 2-kilometre walking restrictions in the early phases of the pandemic at least allowed me to reach my local beach of Trot near Kinvara and sketch figures in isolation whose loneliness was more intensified by the backdrop of the empty wide open beach, which hardly had any footprints on it. Later, when elderly people were allowed out, I tried to capture them alone, contemplating the expanse of the open sea as a metaphor for the fragility of life against the natural elements. Then, as the lockdown allowed more movement of people, I portrayed larger gatherings of people on the same beach in search of the perfect staycation, and how so many ignore the rules of social distancing. The COVID diary images are based on photographs I'd taken on my 2-kilometre walk during social isolation. Other images are from a small visual sketchbook called COVID Diary, often from my imagination, reflecting my fear of the pandemic, particularly in the early stages when there was no vaccine and such a sense of uncertainty of what was really happening in the COVID hospital wards. I hope these diary artworks, even though personal, have a universal appeal, expressing and reflecting the uncertainty and yet unique period we have all lived through collectively and individually. I wanted to also reflect the fear elderly people and people in general felt when they queued outside supermarkets. Like most people, I had pandemic nightmares about the uncertainty of the times that we were living in. I tried to express this idea of uncertainty in a series of isolated elderly people pushing shopping trolleys in remote, exposed, rural locations to exaggerate the insecurity and vulnerability of their experiences. Other images reflect the fear and uncertainty of what happened behind closed doors in the COVID wards and the ICU units at the beginning of the pandemic. Also visit christopherbanahan.wordpress.com to see other images in relation to my Arts Council COVID Crisis Artist Response Award.